So without further ado, we can move to the last panel of the day. We're going to focus on industrial dynamics, local governments, regional clusters, free trade zones, high-tech zones. So a lot to cover in not a long amount of time. That being said, then I would like to leave the floor directly to my colleague Alessio Petino, Business Advisor for EU SME Centre, for his first conversation. And at the end, we're going to have a panel discussion after the second speech from Goglio will be carried out. So please keep your questions for the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's of course, as always, a great pleasure to contribute to this conference. Maybe a few words about myself. I'm working at the EU SME Centre as a business advisor. I am mostly in charge of providing the technical assistance part, some training. So I really have a lot of contacts with SMEs. So I'm the one mainly dealing with SMEs directly. I'm saying this because my presentation today actually builds on this, builds on the experience that we hear from SMEs, what we see, what we hear. So the topic, I have three main points. Of course, time is a bit limited, but the reason I choose these topics is because, a frequent question we get from SMEs is, okay, I'm interested in China. Should I go to Shanghai? Should I go to Beijing, Suzhou, Shenzhen? And of course, I'm not going to answer this question now because it's impossible. You need to do a lot of analysis. But I'm going to mention something that is still be useful for you when trying to select the location of your activity. So the first point is to give an overview of how the industrial policy, how the development policy in China is made, because this will lead us to the core, let's say, topic of today, which are an introduction of a very special zones that China have. There are different zones we will see, free trade zones, high-tech zones, and then I will end the presentation with some conclusions. So I always like to say that to start by reminding everybody, China is a mixed system. You have the market, but you have the planning. You have very important role of the planning. And it's very important because as European SMEs, any foreign company can take advantage of it, can basically by understanding the planning, can try to make more informative decisions. So, of course, it's very top-down planning and strategy setting. It starts with the party, obviously, and then goes to the central government, then eventually goes to ministries and localities, or can also go directly to the localities without going through the ministries. But I think it's very important to bear in mind that it is the local governments, the local administrations that are the real drivers of basically development of growth. And of course they have to operate within certain boundaries that are set at the central level, but within these boundaries, it's up to them to come up with measures, actions that align with their priorities, align with their resources, it's really up to them they're really the key actors. And another thing to keep in mind is that there's a lot of competition among the local administrations. Of course, different provinces, but also within the same province, you have different cities which compete a lot. And foreign companies can take advantage of this. We will see later. At the same time, it's not entirely top-down. Of course, there is a lot of reporting that goes back to the higher levels, and there is of course, based on that, there is evaluation adjustments. So I like to use, wording like centralized flexible mechanisms, because there are it comes down from the central, but then it goes back. There are adjustments, things that work. There might be some adjustment, but are replicated, maybe expanded to other broader areas or regions. And the other thing is that there is this wall of nation kind of approach. What does it mean? It's just the local governments or the government, the central government. They do a policy, and they mobilize the entire country behind this. You have from the banks, from the state-owned enterprises, from the private companies, from the universities, from talents, investment on it. Everything goes behind that. So it's a pretty big kind of mobilization of resources. This is, of course, a simplification, but it basically shows what I've just described. So it starts, with the party at the beginning. Of course, through different platforms, you have, central leaders groups. You have committees also within, ministries, companies. But then it goes to, basically State Council and National Development Reform Commission in certain sectors, but in any case, the central government. And then here, it can, depending on the issue, of course, it can either go directly to the localities, like in the case of free trade zones, it goes directly there, but can also go to the ministries if it's a sectoral kind of issue. And throughout this process, there are transfer payments made from the central to local government, state-owned enterprises, banks, funds, subsidies, universities, everything, all of this is very much present behind all this trajectory. But of course, you see the other arrow that goes back to the other direction. So, there is reporting, there is monitoring, and then eventually it goes back to the source. And there is some adjustments, maybe you can also stop some initiatives if they don't work. And I think it's very important for foreign companies to, this picture, which of course is very simplified, but foreign companies will, in 99% of the cases, they will interact with the local authorities. They will not interact with the central ones. If you are SpaceX, maybe yes, but if in normal company, you will have to work with the localities, And to give you a more concrete example, we mentioned AI, but this is basically, in the case of AI, how the policy was born. So you have, at the very top level of the party, you had this, you had many things, but I think it all goes down to this innovation-driven strategy that was a very big, let's say, direction that terminated in 2020. Of course, you have many documents, Politburo meetings, you have a lot of, but from there, then we had this big plan in 2017, which was also mentioned in the presentations. And then from here, you had, it went to all the different ministries, of course, within their jurisdiction, the responsibilities, they formulated plans to basically translate this into practice. In the case, these are just examples, but the Ministry of Science and Technology was in charge of the funding system, the grants, so they had the plan to basically establish, to direct the funding, let's say, system towards AI. MIT, they had action plans to translate it into the industry, support to SMEs, support to companies. Of course, National Health Commission, there was like this AI in health. So of course, within each, the responsibilities of each ministry, you have specific plans. But you also have the same thing at the local level. There was in Shanghai, there was this big AI development plan, implementing opinions. Basically, in each municipality, in each province, you had something like that. And you also had some more other initiatives, even below this level. You had some districts, some municipalities that, they took some initiatives like the establishment of pilot zone for experimentation of AI technology or AI application scenarios. It's a very, it really goes down to local level, because at the end it is them who are responsible for basically translating the policy into action. And that's where the foreign company, that's what the foreign companies will experience, will see. So the reason I started in this way is because I'm going to talk about free trade zone and high-tech zones, but the background of this is exactly what I've just said. These are tools. This is very well reflected into these free trade zones, all this circuit that we've just seen. I think there are two main keywords, which are experimentalism and pragmatism in Chinese industrial policy. If something, it was also mentioned in the previous presentation, they do tests, they do pilots. If something works, they basically adopt it, expand it also to other areas. And if something doesn't work, they either change it or they terminate it. It's a very trial and experimentation kind of approach. And this is very well reflected in these zones that we see. We have free trade zones, we have high-tech zones or national innovation demonstration zones. You have national economic and technological development zones. You have new areas, you have sectors, you have a lot of kind of zones, areas, parks, a lot of things. Very fancy names also sometimes, but there are also more. I think what we have to, I think it's important to say that these zones go very well beyond their core purpose. So a free trade zone is not just about free trade. Free trade zones is about many other things. It's about institutional reforms. It's about building an entire, ecosystem, with that capacity building for government services, it's much more than that. It's creating an entire, let's say, system behind that. But I think it's very safe to say that these zones are very often at the forefront of China's institutional reform and opening up. A lot of things that we see nationwide were actually maybe in many cases experimented locally in free trade zones or in a high-tech zones. And I will provide concrete examples later. But also these zones, of course, they have different specializations, different focuses, and of course, they are, it's not, we will also see this later, it's not just a clear zone with a clear boundary. You have different parts, different sub-zones which all together form these big zones. Just an overview of free trade zones. This comes from the very top level, from the party level in the state council, and goes to the provinces. Basically, these are important because these are zones outside the customs jurisdiction. So it's in the Chinese territory, of course, but it's not within the customs supervision mechanism. And the purpose is to facilitate international trade through tariff exemptions, relaxed policies, and these are often divided into different, let's say, sections of. There are 22 free trade zones so far, well, 21 plus 1, which is the Hainan Free Trade Port, which covers the entire island. Then we have national economy and technological innovation zones, which basically, these are pretty old. And their objective is to gather knowledge and technology-intensive industries, attracting foreign investment. These come from the MOFCOM. These are under the umbrella of MOFCOM. And of course, each of them have different specialization, but there are 229 of such zones so far. It's a huge number. Basically, in every city, you have something like this. You have high-tech zones, which are very similar to the economic technological zones, but they focus more on of course, high-tech. And until last year, these were the responsibility of MOST, the Ministry of Science and Technology. Now they're under MIT. But basically, the objective is to cultivate high-tech industries, talent, to bring research laboratories, research centers, and to create an ecosystem which focuses on high-tech zones. And also here, we have 178 high-tech zones so far. It's a huge number. And among these, the top, let's say, performing high-tech zones are usually maybe they're groups, or they build something which is one level higher. It's called National Innovation Demonstration Zones, but this is not that relevant for this presentation now. So you also have new areas. Maybe you heard about Pudong new area, you heard about Tianfu new area, Lianjiang new area in Chongqing. So these are massive projects which it's not just about the foreign investment, it's about mobilizing the economy, basically. You have a lot of real estate, you have lot of things happening. And there are 19 of such new areas so far. Pretty sure you're familiar with some of them, Pudong, as I mentioned, but there are many others in different parts of China. And then something very interesting, which was also touched upon in the previous presentation. On top of this, or very often within this, you also have sector-specific, zones or sub-zones. You have new generation AI development experimentation zone, agri-tech innovation and experiment zone, civil aviation. You have a lot of things for basically every sector. And these zones are within free trade zones or high-tech zones. So altogether, they form like an ecosystem and that really drives the development of that sector. And I think it's very important. I'm saying this is because when you are, for instance, in Minhan district or in Pudong in Shanghai, it's very likely that you are within many of such zones and you don't even know. Maybe you are within the new area, you are within the free trade zones, you are maybe within an AI development zone, and maybe you don't even know. It's important to remember this. I want to zoom in on two of these zones, in particular the free trade zones. They're very important in Chinese economy, of course. They account for 1/5 around the foreign direct investment, import-export, and there are many benefits. They offer, let's say, we know that there is a foreign investment negative list for foreign investors. There are certain sectors where you cannot invest or you can invest under certain conditions. In free trade zones, there is these restrictions. This list is shorter compared to the national one. Free trade zones offer you the possibility to import many things without paying customs duties. This is very good for processing trade, for instance. Yesterday we were mentioning you use China to export to other countries in the region. These are perfect examples of how you can do that. Also the customs clearance, it's much streamlined and clearer. Cross-border e-commerce, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but you can have a bonded warehouse in one of these zones, and basically you store your goods there, you don't pay taxes until somebody buys your product through Tmall or one of these cross-border e-commerce platforms. They're also very interesting because they often, they publicize this one-stop kind of window for administrative services. One of the, let's say the bureaucracy in China can be pretty overwhelming many times, but in such zones, sometimes you have a window, you go there, you do everything there. You don't have to run through different government departments. Excellent infrastructure, of course, they are based usually near ports, near harbors, and there are a lot of railway roads which make it very, very convenient to move goods. We mentioned data negative list. I'm not going into this, but these zones often are in charge of refining such lists, so they provide more clarity on what you can or cannot do, and they of course also provide a lot of incentives and support policies. Just some weaknesses, of course, these are often far from city centers, so if you want to hire a very top-notch, let's say, fresh graduate, maybe might be harder to attract him to, I don't know, Yangshan in port in Shanghai rather than, the downtown Shanghai. So there are some limits in this regard. Limited geographical coverage. These are big zones, but still, it's still a zone. It doesn't cover the entire country. And sometimes there is also a lot of duplication. Let's say sometimes they compete a lot against each other, and there is a lot of duplication of what they offer. So this is an example. You see here. This is a map of Shanghai, and specifically, how can I do this? And specifically, well, okay. You see the. Oh, I can say okay. That was easy. Sorry. So you see here, basically, light gray is the Pudong new area. Then the three circles, the purple circles you see there, are the first, let's say, part of the Shanghai Free Trade Zone originally approved. You had Waigaoqiao, you had the Pudong Airport, and you have Yangshan Port in the south. It was expanded. You see the big circle in the middle, that's Zhangjiang, the science city, we'll see later. And then you see a square here, that's Lingang, something which has been pretty intensively promoted recently. But all together, they all form this Shanghai Free Trade Zone. So it's not just one single zone, it's different parts which are often distant from each other, but they all form the same thing. And even within each of these parks, on the right is the map of Lingang, which has also different sections. You have, intelligent manufacturing section. You have, different sections which specialize on different things. So you will receive the slide. So this is to say that, we are not looking at one single block of zone. You have different things which are pretty fragmented and scattered across the territory. High-tech zones, I want to mention something on this. They're very important. They have a very important role in, hosting high-tech companies in China. 2/3 of the companies listed on the STAR market. The STAR is like the NASDAQ kind of market. 2/3 of these companies are based in high-tech zones. They, employ a large percentage of China's R&D workforce, and they also have a lot of benefits. It's very important to know that these are like an ecosystem where you have companies, you have laboratories, you have universities. So basically, it's very easy to establish cooperation in this form of industry, academic cooperation. Institutional reforms. High-tech zones are very important because they they are a platform through which many reforms are tested. To give you a few examples, in the last couple of years, there have been a lot of changes to medical device registration, drug registration system in China. All these things were piloted in Zhangjiang, in Shanghai, many years earlier. Now there is a pre-tax deduction of R&D expenses. Basically, you can deduct from your corporate tax the R&D expenses, and this was trialed in Zhanjiang many years ago. There is the high-tech status, there is a fast-track channel in Beijing, there is green cards for foreigners. These were tested in Shanghai first, in Zhanjiang. And then biological imports, there are some of these zones which have facilitations for if you're a foreign company and you need to import some biological materials or export biological materials. There are some facilitations in some of these zones. If this work, they're expanded nationwide, as it has been. They can also be terminated eventually or adjusted. And of course, they also offer a lot of incentives and support policies. So the weaknesses is that there is a very big difference between Zhongguancun in Beijing or Zhanjiang in Shanghai. These are very expensive. The competition is very strong. Unless you bring something very innovative, very high tech, it's very difficult that you can actually, as a small company from Europe, you can go to Zhanjiang because you will be competing with, all the big companies, local and foreign. Of course, this is also very limited geographical scope, and there is a lot of duplication again also here. So to show you very quick, this is the map of Shanghai. All the orange things that you see there, they're all part of the Zhanjiang innovation zone. So again, we are talking about something which is really scattered across the territories, but they're all integrated somehow. There are resources shared, and there's a lot of cooperation among these parks. And on the right is Beijing. The purple things that you see are part of the Zhongguancun Innovation Demonstration Zone. And also within these zones, you have science cities, you have 3 science cities, you have different parks. So they form an ecosystem. I think the key takeaway, what I'm trying to say is that the ecosystem that these zones represent. Well, this was an example of Chengdu. Well, it's kind of the same situation in every city. And I think there is a lot of ambition, a lot of intention to increase the coordination and the integration of all these zones, not only within each of these zones, but also among the different zones. Okay. We mentioned some of the clusters earlier. Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei. There are 10 of such clusters. I think it's not working, this thing, but... oh, right. So I have to point there. Okay. I just want to mention that there is like a ranking from the World Intellectual Property Organizations called the Global Innovation Index, which has a section on science and technology clusters. So in the global top 100 science and technology clusters, 26 are in China. And in Europe, in the EU, we have 11. This is the top 6. You have Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Guangzhou, which is the top, followed by Beijing, Shanghai, Suzhou. This is public. You can download it if you're interested. But there are many. Let's say it's very innovative. There's this clusterization which means cooperation within different actors within the zone. So it's really about the ecosystem. Okay. So what am I trying to say? It's this, and all of these actually you can find in documents. So the reason I started with the planning thing at the beginning is because if you have resources to read through it, you can identify needs, you can anticipate challenges. If you see that they aim to develop a specific technology within the next 10 years, then maybe you either, it's either an opportunity for you to provide that, or it's a future challenge. It's a challenge that you will face in 10 years. And local administrations are very important, are the key drivers of growth, in my opinion. So you should have a very active outreach to them because they can be supportive to your business. Of course, you have to provide value, but in our experience, what we hear also from small companies, they can be very supportive to you. And free trade zones, high-tech zones could be an interesting option for European companies that look for the Chinese market. They provide many benefits, but in my opinion, the most important benefits are the regulatory requirements, but especially the ecosystem that they represent. Because you can get an incentive, you can get a subsidies, but this will end at some point. Of course, these are important, but this will end. What doesn't end is the ecosystem you have. So you're close to your suppliers, you're close to your clients, you're close to university where you can from where you can hire people. This is the most important one. There are so many of these zones. Each has different focuses. Of course, first-tier cities are more preferred, but these are very competitive, very expensive, while maybe lower tier cities might offer more possibilities, but they might also offer more support. Another thing, last month we went in this business mission, we went to Chengdu, for instance, and we see very fancy buildings. There was this high-tech zone in Chengdu, but you see there, and they have excellent infrastructure, but the impression I had is that these are kind of still pretty empty. So you don't have people, you don't have companies. So you should be aware that when you go to one of these zones, maybe the local administrations provides you a lot of support, but at the end you will lack the companies, you will lack the people. So I don't know how it's going to be useful for your activities. Maybe you don't pay for your office, you don't pay for much, but then maybe you don't have people you can cooperate with. So at the end, I think the primary factors for companies is being close to clients, being close to suppliers and partners, much more than incentives or So this goes back to my previous question. When you try to identify a location for your investment in China, try to, of course, identify which sector, which area is aligned with your solution, where the problem you're trying to solve is more severe, but then find the clients, the suppliers, and the partners that you will be, and go close to them. Well, this is my last slide. So these are personal impressions from, of course, still engaging with companies. The impression is that what is wanted now in China is, advanced technologies, obviously, product solutions in line with of course, the priority sectors and the policies. How is it wanted? Of course, investing in China, producing locally, even better doing R&D locally, which is something European SMEs don't do, but that's like the ideal kind of thing. Remember that the key word in China is self-reliance. So if you invest, if you have R&D in China, you basically bring it there, and maybe it will be very difficult to bring it out again in the future. But so does it mean that if I just do exports, if I'm not interested in producing in China, not interested in doing R&D in China, does it mean that I have no opportunities? No. You see, there are still opportunities. Traditional exports, development, product development projects, I think you have opportunities. But I think it's becoming more and more difficult. There is this, attention to producing locally, to really, I'm ending, sir. So this model is vulnerable to long term. I think, and on the long term, the expectation is still that you bring the technology, that you bring the production there. If you don't do that, unless you are the world's only supplier of a certain product, then you will be replaced. It's important that, of course, you have long-term perspective, you act gradually, and in my opinion, one good entry point that we heard in a few cases is to start with a demonstration project. Horizon Europe, maybe through that you can also launch cooperation, but also opportunities from member states funding agency. Many member states have joined calls with China, and it's not really hard. You don't have to commit a lot. You just do the project. If it works, the project can evolve. If it doesn't work, well, the project just ends. So I think it's a very important entry model. This is my email. I hope it was interesting. What I'm really trying to say is that these zones could be very, very helpful for your investment. And if you want to know more about any of these, or maybe some more details about something I mentioned, feel free to reach out. We are here for you. And yeah, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alessio, for the insightful presentation. We are now moving to the last speech of the conference. We have the pleasure of having here today with us Mr. Mirko Turrina, General Manager for Goglio Packaging Co.
With great pleasure that I'm here today sharing the business case operation of Goglio Packaging in Tianjin, free trade zone. So I'm Mirko Turrina, the General Manager of the company. We start sharing the agenda. I will go through. I will give a brief introduction of what is Goglio, and Golio Tianjin, because we are not a famous company not famous to the most of the consumers. And I will pass through the overview of a Tianjin Free Trade Zone, and at the end share the new development and the opportunity in green manufacturing and in our business. Golio Group, here we have a roadmap of the development. Is a family-owned multinational company established in the 1850 in Milano. And until the 1960, the company operated in the packaging industry. And from the 1961, with the new technology development, the company started to develop in the packaging with the plastic material, basically, and to guarantee the freshness of the product. And we launched the patent system called Fresco, that has been very successful and help support in the development of the business worldwide. In 1968, one very important milestone of the company development was the innovation of the degassing valve for utilized especially in the coffee packaging, that became our way to expand, to have the advantage to expand all over the world. So we develop in the US, and you can see also in China, and last recently development in Brazil with one acquisition that happened last year. On the global footprint, Golio has 9 manufacturing plants, with 4 in Europe, 5 in Europe, 2 in US, 1 in China, and 1 in Brazil. Totally, we have more than 2,000 employees and value of production of close to 500 million euro as per as last year. In Tianjin, Golio has a much smaller scale. We've been registered in 2004, start manufacturing in 2006, and covering a surface of 50,000 square meters. Our target and value proposition is to be leader in the flexible packaging and provide customized solution for customer in the food and industrial sectors. How Golio Tianjin started the business is pretty interesting, because we began to serve the Chinese market through a trading office in the old 1999. So the packaging, the flexible packaging, and specifically the aseptic packaging for tomato paste, were sold, produced in Italy and sold in China. Then in the years, the Chinese authority went to Italy and invited Golio to be located specifically in Tianjin. In 2004, this project started. In 2006, we started manufacturing, and 2010, we started the localization, also the product development. That is still something that we do locally, while we leave the more scientific research into localizing into Italy. In the recent years, in the last years, we surf a new wave of development for us, because we launched we took the opportunity to support the development of the coffee market, that in the past was a market extremely small in China, but in the last years this market has been growing substantially. So we launched a first initial phase of just 10 million RMB, because we were seeing the growth, but not that confident. But just 2 years later, we launched and concluded the second part of the project with an investment of about 50 million euros. And then in 2022, we have been able to cooperate with the Tianjin Free Trade Zone to support the offshore trading model that I will share with you a little bit more in the next slide. And in 2022, we reached also our milestone of 200 million RMB of turnover and got the Green Factory certificate. Tianjin Free Trade Zone, like Alessio mentioned, is one of the free trade zones in China. This now, as it is now, has been established in 2015. So when Goryeo moved in Tianjin, there was another free trade zone, but this is a new conglomerate, and they cover almost 120 square kilometers. So with a port and very high level infrastructures. In this free trade zone, Goryeo is located in this point where the first company to be moved. But nearby now there are actors of very important role, especially in the area where Tianjin decided to invest and support, like aerospace, where we have Airbus, Bombardier, or other companies that are in the high-tech industry. Why Goryeo choose Tianjin is clear from the geography. Goryeo was coming to China at that time to serve the tomato industry, tomato processor, so especially the industry of tomato paste. And Tianjin is on the latitude very close, very similar to the central Italy. And the close, and in Tianjin there is the most important port to export the tomato paste or agricultural product normally produced in the inner land, like Xinjiang and Inner Mongolia. So Tianjin has been the closest port to this area. And at the time also, the local authorities provided very interesting policies and support to the company. For example, in our case, we produce aseptic packaging that after manufacturing in our company need a sterilization. And since Goryeo came with on a greenfield project and the free trade zone was also completely undeveloped at that time, was only on paper, Goryeo asked to have close to the company, a company able to sterilize the packaging. And so far, the free trade zone arranged just opposite of our company this kind of facility, inviting a company specialized in this kind of a service. And this is giving to us an extreme advantage even now compared to our Chinese competitor that they have to load the goods and send these goods by truck far away. A recent benefit we got also from the free trade zone is the ability to have a kind of flexibility on the rule, because they have some opportunity, some way to issue local regulation that can be enforced just in the local area. For example, in the last project we launched in 2022 and concluded in 2023, that was involving chemical manufacturing, chemical process, we got a fast track, and the project was concluded quickly, about 1 year, even during COVID period. At the same time, as I mentioned, sorry, the second benefit we got recently was the ability to have an offshore trade business. So we serve from Tianjin all Southeast Asia, and sometimes we have to buy goods in Italy and deliver to Southeast Asia. And this was a bit difficult for the control of the foreign currency. So we normally have very strict control on the bill of lading. But the new regulation allow us to do this very smoothly and just with the electronic bill of lading. So simplify our working, our operation a lot. And in the meantime, in these years, we also had a very close communication with the CCPAT locally that is always connect with us to gather information and have a constructive dialogue to improve the business environment. What we think is the new development and the green manufacturing for us is here in this share here in this PPT are the development of the last two phase. I mean, the two phase that we had in recently is about the coffee business and the food service. Here you can see the product, the picture of our product, and this development will conclude in 2020 and 2022. I would say that this development is something not unique in terms of general speaking, but what give us the safety and the push to move on was the idea and the clear sign that the Chinese government is supporting the sustainable development. And our company in Europe, as Europe as a whole, I think is much advanced, and therefore we think that we can bring and we can leverage our development in the sustainable material to support the growing market of coffee, in our case, and the food service, and still play a role in a market like the packaging industry that is extremely competitive. At the same time, during this expansion, I decided to also integrate a part of our new production of our consumption energy and green development by implementing a self-production of energy using solar panel. And during this period, we cover the roof of our building and the parking lot. And what was extremely interesting for us was the possibility to use a purchasing power agreement. So this expansion was not financed by us, but financed by third party that we were committed to buy the energy from. Here you can see the picture of the area involved. And what made me proud as also as Italian, European, the fact that this project was developed in cooperation with an Italian company producing solar panel, and this gave us a good support in this project. In terms of benefit, this project guaranteed us, as I mentioned, investment of was not an investment made by us, and allow us to reduce the carbon footprint, covering about 14% of total energy consumed, and with a saving of the energy cost on a yearly basis about 300,000 RMB in terms of euro 40,000 euro. But that was not the purpose, but I would say it was it's something that always nice to have. For future, we still remain committed and I would say reasonably positive, and we keeping our direction through what is our advantage in this very broad and competitive market. We plan to extend our market share in the fast development sector in Asia Pacific, as I mentioned, in coffee and the food service, where we have a strong know-how. Then we target to remain also strong in our core business, that was the original business and still important, the aseptic packaging for tomato and other fruits. And this can be, I think we can reach by remaining committed to ESG, considering all the stakeholders and improving our appeal also to the local authorities in terms of sustainable development. And to do so, for example, last year we've been certified as a green manufacturing plant, as I'm sharing here. We got a Tianjin municipal level certificate, and this green manufacturing definition is based on certain criteria that we have to respect, and I would say proving that we are on our way to reduce the resources in our manufacturing. And this standard is a typical Chinese standard that for us is extremely useful, because most of our customers, especially in the food industry in China, are SOE, so state-owned enterprise. Then this kind of recognition allow us to get a better rank during the business negotiation or bidding. And this was also a way for us to access to local subsidies, and in the future maybe access to green financing. So that's all for today. Sorry, and being online is a bit different than being in person. So thank you for your attention, and I'm available for any question. Stop sharing.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I would like to also invite Alessio Petino to once again join us on stage for the Q&A. And I would also like to then open the floor to any questions coming either from the audience or online. I see that you have a question from Sarah.
I have two small questions for Mirko and one question for Alessio. Maybe I'll start with Mirko. So the two questions, many thanks for the presentation. When you were deciding where to set up, was there another city apart from Tianjin that your company was looking at? And second question is, since you are in Tianjin, what have been the major challenges that your company has faced operating there? And the question to Alessio, excellent presentation, many thanks. Regarding the clusters, because the concept of clusters in China is quite different than in Europe. Do you see already any cooperation between the Chinese clusters and the European clusters? That's my question. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I answer first. Sorry. Originally, our Goglio was planning to set up the manufacturing in a different city, specifically in Xiamen. And the reason of that was due to a presence of a very long-term supplier of Goglio. So that was a kind of a location where we could localize the manufacturing and be supported by a partner, a trusted partner. But the reality, as I mentioned, is the geography that Xiamen, that is still in China, like Tianjin, but it takes 1,000 kilometers more from Xiamen to reach our customers than Tianjin to reach our customers. So it's extremely far. And at that time, when in 2004, there was a tax on the transit of the truck across the Yellow River, across the river, because the infrastructure were quite not as developed as now. So the cost of transport, that if we choose to be located in Xiamen, would be much higher. So at the end, the selection of Tianjin came from the assessment of this advantage of Tianjin, being on the same latitude, so not crossing any major river into China. And the second, the very attractive offer that did the municipality together with the Bank of China, when they came, they went to Italy and they offered this plan to the owner of the company. So this was really the reason why I choose Tianjin, and realize also that Tianjin is a very important port for most of our customers that export from there. The major difficulties, that the challenge that we face now in Tianjin is that it's very well known that there is a gap in terms of development between North and South. So the economy in North of China is a bit slower compared to South. So for us now that we are supporting the development of the new business, new market like coffee, being Tianjin could be a kind of a challenge for us, because we are far from the major consumer that are normally located more in the south, Shanghai and Guangzhou. So this is one challenge, but I think we are going to work out a plan. That's it. So excuse me. I hope it was clear.
And maybe if I answer the question for me, I certainly see there are some initiatives. You also had some joint kind of parks or incubators within maybe some of these zones, some of these clusters. So certainly there are some. The question is, how successful are these? For sure, you had a few examples which are pretty successful, but I would say that overall, I think the expectations were a bit did not match the results, at least so far. But then the other thing is that I see this dialogue, this cooperation coming from the initiative of the Chinese side, mostly, I think. It's the Chinese side outreaching to the European side rather than the other way around. That's my perception.
Thank you. I have a question for Alessio and another question for Mirko. So for Alessio, you mentioned that one of the key considerations when looking at, whether a high-tech zone or a free trade zone may be for you as a company is less to look at the incentives and subsidies and so on and so forth, and more to focus on the ecosystem. If you're a small company, you also mentioned that, if some of the more popular high-tech zones, free trade zone in Beijing and in Shanghai may not really be accessible for you because of high costs and strong competition. At the same time, those may be the places where you could benefit the most from the ecosystem, right? So how do you balance, as a small company, the cost considerations and competition versus the benefits of the different ecosystems from the more popular zones? And then for Mirko, I would be very curious to hear more about your process to obtain these PPA. Access to green electricity is one of the issues that gets mentioned by European companies in China as a key challenge. I know that Tianjin has been developing some policies in order to address this issue, so I'd be curious to hear your particular experience with this.
Okay, maybe I'll start. Thank you for the difficult question, which is indeed very difficult and very, very important, which I think, let me also clarify that incentives and subsidies and support are important. Maybe I didn't express myself very clearly. They're very important, but I think at the end of the day, also based on some discussions we had, maybe with some startups, say, I'd rather find a client rather than winning a competition like this, entrepreneurship competitions, receiving investment. So I think that's where my statement on subsidies came from. But of course, these are important. I think the question is that if you're a small company and you go to Zhongguancun or Zhanjiang, I think the main thing is that they don't want you. I think, as somebody was mentioning this morning, you go to a bank, you apply for a loan, but if you're a small client, maybe you can cause trouble and you don't bring a lot of benefits. So why working with you? But at the same time, if you remember the maps I showed before, you have Zhangjiang, you have Zhongguancun, which is composed of many parks. So maybe you don't go to the main, core, let's say, zone of Zhongguancun. Maybe you might choose another, let's say, more peripheral, but it's still part of Zhongguancun. Where maybe you don't have to go to, I don't know, Pinggu or Miyun, but maybe you can, Fanshan or Fentai, so some more peripheral kind of, not in the core. If you go to Zhangjiang, they don't want. I mean, you have no way you can afford, but even if you could afford, they wouldn't give the space to you, I think, unless you are very innovative one. So even within the most expensive one, the Beijing, Shenzhen, there are still parks which could be more affordable, which still belong to the. So maybe that could be an option that you can look at.
So, okay, I answer my question. In terms of green energy, I would like to share that Tianjin indeed is pretty advanced in terms of policy. Already set up in Tianjin a desk where you can buy green energy. It was probably one of the first in China. And this has been thanks to the different organizations that advocate for this in the different years. And for what is regarding the PPA, the project on Goyo, and specifically for the PPA framework, we were the first one in the free trade zone. So indeed, we were the icebreaker. And then we find a partner willing to finance this. And the authorities were cooperative. I think they were cooperative because we were, at that time, we did contextually with the new investment. So a new investment during COVID period was something extremely welcome from the authorities. And at the same time, they only asked to the provider, energy provider, to register the company that sell the energy to us to the free trade zone area itself. So this free trade zone area, as far as I understood, many other in China, they have rules that you can buy energy only from companies that are locally registered within the free trade zone, but no matter who is the ownership. So this was done, and they were very helpful, and is working pretty well now.
Yep, thank you both for your presentations, really great. My question is for Alessio. So one of my main takeaways from your presentation is that there really just is a kind of overwhelming amount of choice, when looking at where you might go. So on a very practical level, I mean, what is your advice to an SME that's sort of approaching this for the first time? Where do you even start with, all of these zones? Is that, a service that actually EU SME Centre provides, in sort of consultation of what to do and where to go?
Thank you for very relevant question. I think this requires obviously a lot of study, a lot of analysis. So it's something that we, as a first level kind of as provider of assistance, we don't do. I mean, we can maybe guide you, we can tell you, okay, maybe you can look at this, and that, but then it's something you have to do yourself or with other people, basically, because we are first level kind of. I think very practically what an SME could do, for instance, if you're a technology company, of course, read the national level 5-year plan, not just the big 5-year plan, but also the sectoral 5-year plans for each sector, or similar plans like the AI, new generation AI plan. Then do the same at the local level. Try to maybe identify where, if you bring a solution to a problem, try to identify where this problem is most severe, and you can try to do so still by reading the local 5-year plans, going to the district level, well, if you have the resources, but starting with the province, but going very deep. And then maybe you have a short list of 2-3 kind of cities, and then maybe you have to do outreach. I think you have to do a lot of, for sure you have to be on the ground. You cannot expect respect to, sitting from your office in Europe, it's very difficult to accomplish anything. But if you have a resource on the ground, maybe try to do outreach. If you're a technology company, you might consider, something I really like to say often is go to scientific events, where there are professors, where you showcase if you have a scientific article or Nature publication, that's like very powerful marketing tool. So go to these kind of, also scientific events, do a lot of networking, and then try to find somebody that, but you have to have somebody on the ground, reaching out to people, because nobody knows you unless you are an exception. That's what I would say. You need to start, and that's the benefit of the planning. So yeah, and that's what I would probably do.
I think we still have time for a couple more questions. So we have the first one from here.
Grazie. I want to share a comment and a question. I'm also very interested in free trade zone. I visited many of the different industrial parks and free trade zone. I also joined several visits to the new Lingang free trade zone that China is promoting on a national level. And I shared the similar thoughts. The criticalities that I see as a professional in this field is that when I meet the authority, they don't have, let's say, the skills or technical presentation on the specific advantages. Is a very general, but the incentives are there. So in fact, it is more marketing and a commercial approach. Because, for instance, for me, the best part of this free trade zone, of course, are testing new systems that will be expanded in a larger territory. For instance, you showed Shanghai or Chongqing, different areas to be expanded in larger areas. And also to evaluate what is good and what is not good, probably to attract investors or to develop a certain strategy for the city or for China. But generally it is, I believe, very useful for, again, the regional business. And of course, a large area in terms of free trade zone can allow a production without VAT, so indirect tax, and also duties on a temporary basis, but also grant a number of financial advantages like a cash pooling or the possibility to effect loans from China to the sister or to the even mother company in Europe, only in some of these areas. Plus, like entrepot trading is something practically not possible in China. That means purchasing in Europe and selling to Korea without transiting the territory of China with an entity, a company that is in China, is practically only possible in some of these free trade zones. But to share this kind of details is very complex with the authority because they don't have the proper understanding, or they don't introduce this kind of officer. But I think is very useful. And for SME, I do agree that is first the market, the suppliers, the cost, the location, the logistics, and therefore very often, let's say, the key areas are the closest to the key partners. But to analyze this is important because, for instance, a successful free trade zone or a successful industrial park is the Suzhou or the Singapore Industrial Park in Suzhou. And when you visit there, it's very different from visiting other areas. They show you what was the project more than 10 years ago and what they did in 10 years. So they show you that they achieved more than what was planned. While in the other areas, you find empty buildings where they tell you what they want to do, but it's difficult to understand if they will succeed to achieve this kind of result. And to Mirko, thank you for last presentation. I think very effective, very useful. I would like to ask if you can compare or if you can share some comment on if you have experience or similar environment in other region of the world where Goglio has plant? Because, for instance, for me, it's also interesting to understand the qualities or the differences that we have for technological parks in Italy or in Europe compared to what we have in China, also to address what we need in China or what we need in Europe. So I don't know if, Mirko, you compared or thought through the company group the different business environment in different industrial parks where Goglio is present in the different regions of the world that you highlighted. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorenzo, for the question. Extremely challenging. I will say that when I talk this with my team, my boss in Italy or the management, what they can say that China, where Tianjin operates, is definitely have advantage in terms of cluster of supplier and support for operation. The things happen much faster. We can compare in the recent expansion we did in the group what happened, the speed we had in China compared to our similar expansion in US. We took 2 years more than Tianjin. I think the cluster is in terms of network of suppliers, services, and speed. That are definitely difference that you can really see on the variable on the cost and the speed of development of the company. So this is what come to my mind first. I don't have data to share more than this.
I'd say we take a very final question for this panel, and then we have it from here, Ms. Wang.
Hello, I have 2 small questions for Mirko. One is that do you think your advantage in the Tianjin zone is because you're a European brand, so the ESG reputation is so much better, or there's some management advantage so that local competitors can catch up with you right now? And the second question is the Tianjin government is trying to be more efficient, but nationwide, because I visit a lot of clients, it seems that all the government officials are trying to inspect or audit or visit companies so much to do their surveys. Are you subject to this kind of inspection recently? And would the Tianjin zone do anything to fend off those excessive surveys for your company?
Thank you for the question. I in terms of advantage, business advantage, I'm a hedge in terms of sustainability. I don't think the matters that we European is not an advantage itself. I think the advantage is that Europe as a European Union has developed the regulation ahead of China. Therefore, our companies in Italy have already developed technology that can guarantee this a more sustainable development of the packaging industry. Probably Chinese local competitor can develop of our technology or reach our technology someday. I don't think is possible, but our approach is a system provider. So we don't provide only packaging solution, but we provide also the equipment to do the filling especially for the coffee industry. And in the new material development, where there is not a standard yet, because everyone talk about sustainable packaging, but there is not yet a standard, even in Europe. So the lack of standard leave to us a lot of space for improving equipment, and this the packaging equipment also pull improvement on the packaging material. This, I think, is an advantage that will take years to be filled, because we don't have a direct competitor on this system approach. for what is regarding the orphan visit, I think this is common, and there is a pressure on this to guarantee the lower pollution and the safety. This, I think, is a nationwide, not only in Tianjin. There is a clear enforcement to guarantee less incidents and have a more clear sky days. What is their KPI of the people in this kind of department, in the Environmental Bureau Protection department. We don't have any. We don't. I can say we cannot complain for the too often visit. Actually, we just try to comply, and normally the local authorities are quite cooperative to support us and pre-inspect us and explain to us in advance the rules and avoid that inspection coming from other cities, from Beijing, may find problems. So I think there is a cooperative approach on this, but we need to maintain high alert on this. Thank you.
And thank you to both the speakers of this panel, Mr. Alessio Petino, Mr. Mirko Turrina. It's been a pleasure having you here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that being said, we've reached the end of today's conference and of the Understanding China conference overall for the entirety of the 2 days. We hope that you enjoyed the program, that the contents that were provided have been relevant for you. In order to better gauge the direction towards which to move for future events, I would like to remind the in-person attendees to fill out the survey form that you can find on your table. For the online attendees, you have a QR code that you can scan in order to fill out this quick survey. As usual, EU SME Centre is more than happy to receive comments and feedbacks, and is always there to support small and medium enterprises. So please feel free to reach out to us for any questions you might have in the future. Once more, thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending today. Thank you very much to the speakers of today's sessions, yesterday's sessions. It's been a great pleasure for me to be here with you today, and I hope we will have the chance to meet once more to our activities in the future. Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.